Welcome, everyone. As the current chairman of the Vernon Select Board, I would like to reconvene this year's Vernon Town meeting. At this point, I'd like to nominate Trish Hain as moderator pro tem.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to nominate Trish Hain as moderator pro tem. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Trish?
Good evening. Just a reminder of the rules of the body. On any discussions, when we have a motion on the floor, you may be called on to speak once on the motion or the amendment that's on the floor. Then everyone else who wants to speak will have a chance, and you will be allowed your second time after everyone has had one chance to speak to the item, either the amendment or the motion. At this point, I'd like to introduce some people who would like to have a moment to speak with you, some very important people. First, I'd like to introduce Wyndham County's State Senator, Jeanette White.
Thanks. It's very convenient that you have yours at night because I've been all over the county today and I'm really tired. I couldn't make any more, I don't think. But I do want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to represent Wyndham County in Montpelier. I love it. I love the public policy part of it. And while I don't always agree with every one of my constituents, I think that I try my best to represent on most cases. This year, in the Senate, we have two committees. I think Mike is going to talk to you about his committee and what they're doing up there. But in the Senate, we're on two different committees. So in the morning, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and in the afternoon, I chair the Government Operations Committee, which is my favorite because it deals with issues of democracy, elections, municipal affairs, that kind of stuff. And this year, it's the year of the census, or we did the census 2 years ago. So we're redistricting all the House and the Senate seats. And I'm chairing the special Senate redistricting committee. Now, I don't know how much you know about redistricting, but every time you make a change in one town or one county, it has a domino effect, and it falls over into the neighboring counties. And pretty soon you have all these odd-shaped districts. Vernon and Guilford are one House district, and the House map is pretty well done. In terms of the Senate map, we're supposed to be paying attention to counties, and I don't know what will happen yet and how we'll make the counties equitable. Our Constitution says one person, one vote, so we have to pay attention to the representation, and we've had a lot of growth in the Chittenden and Franklin County areas. So it does a lot to disturb the Senate seats. I can, however, assure you that Vernon will probably not be moved out of Wyndham County because you're not one of the border towns, so I think you're pretty safe where you are. In Judiciary Committee, we're looking at issues of, primarily right now, of our prison population. Vermont is one of the highest in terms of the number of people we have incarcerated per population, and I think we're the absolutely highest in the number of people that are under the Corrections Department. That's pretty frightening, and there are a lot of reasons for it, but one of the things that we're looking at is on any given day, we're told there are approximately 200 people that are in prison that probably don't need to be there. They are not violent offenders. They have had felonies. Oftentimes, they start with a nonviolent misdemeanor, and it just spirals, and they end up in prison. So, and any given day, we are having in prison up to 200 people at a cost of, for men, $55,000 a year, and for women, $75,000 a year. That's a lot of money that could be spent on better community supports and programs in the community to keep people out of prison. We're also looking at the same issue around the driving with suspended licenses, because we find the same thing has happened there. There are about 26,000 voters or drivers in Vermont that are driving with suspended licenses. And most of them started with a fine that they couldn't pay. Hardly any of those, probably around 2 or 3%, are criminal offenses, like DUI. Most of them are just fines that couldn't be paid, and it just continues to spiral until they're ending up with a criminal offense after the 5th one. So we're trying to look at what we should do there. We're also, in government operations, as I said, is my favorite, and one of the things we're looking at is what constitutes an open meeting and public records. That's complicated. I was just telling Mike that when I can't sleep at night, I watch the Vernon Select Board on TV because it is on all the time. So I don't think you have to worry too much about your Select Board open meetings because it's right there. But we are looking at that issue, and part of what we're looking at is vital records. Very many people, I didn't know this, but in Vermont, anybody can call and get anybody's birth certificate, a certified copy of a birth certificate. So if I have some reason to want to start a new identity, sometimes I think there are many reasons why I should start a new identity, but I could call and get anybody's certified birth certificate, and a town clerk does not have the ability to tell me I can't have it because it's a public record. The paper that the certified copies are printed on sells on the black market in other parts of the country for $10,000 a sheet. Now, we don't have to sell it in Vermont because we can just call the town clerk's office and get a copy. So we're trying to tighten that up a little bit. It's causing problems with, the FBI has told us that they have, of their 50 top cases, about half of them have started identities with, they're not fake Vermont birth certificates, but they're fraudulently obtained birth certificates. So we're looking at that. And the other thing is if you move to Colorado, and this is happening in more and more states, but right now, Colorado, if you should decide to move to Colorado and your child was born here and now he turns 16 in Colorado and he wants to get his driver's license, guess what? They won't honor a Vermont birth certificate because it's so easy to get them. So we have to tighten that up, and I have details of that. Anybody who has some questions about it can ask. We took a vote on Thursday and Friday in the Senate that was quite controversial for a lot of people, and I'm going to, I don't know if I'll give myself in hot water here with anybody or not, but I'm going to tell you how I voted and why, because I think it's important. In Vermont, we do not allow children to go to public school or licensed daycares unless they've been immunized. And it's the regular childhood immunizations. This isn't anything newfangled or anything, it's just the regular ones. We allow 3 exemptions. A medical exemption if your child has an allergy. We allow a religious exemption, and we allow a personal philosophical exemption. The number of people who've been claiming philosophical objections has gained a lot of ground. And so on some immunizations, we're as low as 40% immunization rate, and at others hover at about 90%. What they've found in most places is that once you get to a 95% immunization rate, less than that, you are endangering your entire population. And immunizations aren't 100%, so for people who haven't lived with polio and smallpox and whooping cough and all of those diseases, they don't see that this is a huge issue. It is a huge issue, and it's a balancing act between the individual's rights and the public good. So I did get a lot of concern about this from people who were concerned about us affecting their individual rights. I chose to vote to eliminate the philosophical exemption, because I think in this case I came down on the side of the good of the entire community as opposed to individual rights. And we're not telling people they have to get their kids immunized. We're just telling them that if they don't, they can't go to public school or licensed daycare. I'm going to say one more thing, but I have to walk over there because I forgot to bring it up here with me.
Hold on 1 second. Thank you.
So Vernon was pretty lucky, along with my hometown of Putney, during the flood. We didn't get hammered too badly. And I don't know how many of you have this on your car or have purchased one and have it on your bathroom mirror or someplace else. But this is an I Am Vermont Strong license plate. It's been designed as a fundraiser for victims of Irene, because there are still approximately in the state 300 people who don't have homes and who probably never will be able to move back where they were, who lost everything, and trying to make them whole by using FEMA money and even all the fundraisers that have happened is pretty hard. So I'm promoting this. I'm being unabashedly aggressive about this and encouraging people to get them. It costs $5 to produce them. They cost $25 to buy. $18 goes to the victims of the flood and $2 to the Vermont Food Shelf. Now you can get these in 3 different ways. You can go to the DMV office. I don't think there's one here. I think that you have to go to Dummerston. You can drive up to Dummerston and get one. You can order one through Vermont Life and pay $8 handling and shipping. Or you can give me a check or cash for $25 and I'll get it down to Vernon. Now I've got, I think, about 120 people today that I got to give me money to, and it's not for me. I'm actually turning it in. But so if you want, I'll hang around for a little while if anybody wants a license plate. And the entire $18 goes to the flood relief fund. So that's all I have to say. And if anybody has any questions, I don't know if you, Mike?
That plate goes over the front plate?
You can legally put this over the front plate of your car until June of 2014. You can have it on there. This doesn't mean that we've allowed you to have other things. So if you have a license plate that says, I love Labrador Retrievers, don't put it on the front of your car because that will be illegal. But this one you can put on there. But you can also put it in the back, on the side window of your car. You can hang it on your bathroom mirror. You can put it in the trunk in your garage because in 20 years it'll be valuable. You can send it to your kids out of state. You can do anything with it you want to, but yes, you can put it on the front of your car, legally. Thank you.
Would anyone have a question for Senator White or a comment? Brana, please wait for the microphone.
Good evening. I've heard you talk. First of all, you talked about the Judiciary Committee. I believe I've heard that Vermont has a law that says first offenders can be remediated through working with the police department. And are there a lot of first offenders in the prisons in Vermont right now?
There are a number of first offenders. There are less people that end up there because of a first offense, but what happens is that it becomes a downward spiral. So somebody has a first offense, they then get on probation, and we have what are called standard conditions of probation. So even if your probation, for example, had nothing to do with alcohol, you're prohibited from drinking or being any place where there's alcohol. So you're at your sister gets married and you're at the reception afterwards and there's alcohol there and you can be arrested. That's a violation of your parole. So then you're back in the system for a violation of your parole. Now you might end up in prison. So there are fewer first-time offenders.
Well, I know that in Brattleboro, we have the Brattleboro Justice Center, and they work with the police department, or they're supposed to work with the police department. I think the challenge is that a lot of police do not know that they can work with towns and first offenders in that way.
That's true, and it depends on, we have 14 different systems in Vermont. It sounds awful, but we almost have 14 different systems of justice because we have 14 independently elected state's attorneys. And some of them really go after people for certain offenses, some of them don't. I don't know if you know this or not, but if there are any hunters in the room here, you probably know that shooting a swimming deer is a felony. You can go to prison for 5 years for shooting a swimming deer. Now, I don't think that people should be shooting swimming deer, but I'm not sure that it's worth a 5-year prison sentence. So there are things like that that we're working on, and we've got a list of offenses that we're going to be working on and trying to figure out how to get people made whole again. So.
Mark Parker.
So,
Was there somebody behind you?
Sorry, go ahead, Mark. I'll wait.
yes.
Yeah, you will.
Go ahead.
Since we have you here, Senator,
Yes.
how do you feel about the Vermont Yankee trying to be shut down by this particular administration, and how do you plan on voting for it? As Vernon residents here, most of us still like our plant.
I know. And actually, I don't think there will be another vote. We did a vote a year ago. I don't think, or 2 years ago. I don't think we have the ability to do another vote. I actually disagree with the decision, and I know that I've talked to many of you about this, and I disagree with keeping the plant open. But I think that whether you agree with the decision, whether you think that Vermont Yankee should be kept open or not, I think that there are implications with Judge Murtha's decision that go beyond the issue of Vermont Yankee. And I think that issue is the ability of state legislatures and deliberative bodies of any kind being able to have discussion and debate about issues that aren't necessarily part of the ultimate decision, and then having a court impute their motivations. And the Supreme Court had decided a number of years ago that courts could not impute motivation to legislative bodies. They could only take on face value what the bill was and what the debate around the particular bill was. So I think that while I disagree with the decision, I believe that even if I agreed with the decision, I would disagree with what it was based on. I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense, but I think that we have an issue here of states and other deliberative bodies being able to have discussions without the courts then imputing motivation. But I don't think there will be another vote. I think we've had our shot.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I'm not as knowledgeable of everyone as Tim, so gentleman in the red shirt, and if you could just state your name when you turn on the mic, please.
Well, it's on. George Bond. I'm curious with the, as you being a member of the Judicial Committee, there's a couple questions that I have in mind. One of them, you were talking about the amount of incarcerated prisoners and such of the facts. Of course, most of us that read the paper know that Vermont grows some of the greatest marijuana around, so there are probably a lot of people for that in jail. But is there a chance of, I don't know too much about the incarcerated prisoners coming back out into the chain gang, because I've heard and read some stuff about in the state workers stuff highway division throughout the state that they were looking to cut back on their budget a little bit and lower on some people. So would that not be a better way to, if they're going to lower down on the state people, bring out, you know, the chain gang of the people that are like minimal custody?
I thought you were going in a whole different direction there, I must admit. But we have work camps, and people who are minimal risks are sentenced to work camp as opposed to being sentenced to a prison. And it's a different level of incarceration. You do go out, and there's one in St. Johnsbury, and I can't remember where the second work camp is. We're talking about possibly one in Windsor. But there is one in St. Johnsbury, and for example, there the prisoners do go out. They go out and hold jobs during the day, or they do what might have been done in the past during the Depression by WPA workers and Conservation Corps workers. They also have their jobs inside prison. These are made by prisoners. So, and they get paid for doing them. But I don't think we'll ever bring back the, I lived in Georgia for a year, and it was pretty depressing to see the chain gangs, because they really were chain gangs. They were all chained together, chipping away at the sides of the roads, and that was pretty bleak. But I think we can find better programs to do in communities for people, have them on home furlough, so they can have jobs and be having their life. There are other possibilities, but I don't think we'll ever bring back the real chain gangs. So I thought you were going in a different direction, though.
No,
Okay.
not going anyplace else. The other question was, you talked about people that drive a driver's license that you know, continually, and I've even seen from time to time people with 5th and 6th DUIs. Now, you know, to get that far out, yeah, they probably are going to jail. But people that are like into like second, thirds before they get too far out, why are they, or I would say, why could they not do community service in areas where they would be teaching why we shouldn't do this?
I think that's probably a good idea. There's a huge difference, though, between driving with a suspended license and DUI, because most of the people who are driving with suspended licenses, it does not start with anything like a DUI. It starts with an unpaid speeding ticket or something like that. But if you are convicted of a DUI and you can go through diversion, there are a lot of things that you can do. If you're convicted a second time, what we just passed last year was, and this is an attempt to get to habitual offenders who really have problems, not that they're just driving without a license, but they have substance abuse problems. So what happens now is if your blood count is above, some of you may know that it's 0.08 is the regular one, but if on your second offense the blood count is at 0.16, then you have to spend, not only are you convicted of a DUI, but on your third offense, if you're caught with any alcohol, anything over 0.02, which is mouthwash, if you're convicted of anything over 0.02, it's a third offense. You don't have to reach the 0.08 on the third offense if the second offense had a very high blood count. So that's an attempt to get not to people who are having a couple drinks before they go home from work, but people who are seriously drinking a lot and are incapacitated. So was that correct, Richard? Do you know? Is it 0.0?
I do not know
0.16.
specifically whether that's correct or not.
But it's for people with very high levels on the second offense. Then the third offense, you can't drink anything after that for 3 years. You have to have a clean record. So.
Mr. Fairman.
Senator White, there are of course more aspects to Vermont's energy future than Vermont Yankee, but I'd like to ask you about one of them. If Green Mountain Power and Central Vermont Public Service merge, the Quebec government will control them and Vermont gas systems via Gas Metro, while also owning Hydro-Quebec. I'm wondering what your views, or perhaps your colleagues' views, are on the advisability of a foreign government having that much control over Vermont's energy future.
Thank you. It is, I'm not on the Energy Committee, so I'm not as intimately involved with what the hearings they're having there. And there is the Public Service Board is hearing this right now, so some of the stuff we can't interfere with. But I think that there's an attempt to do a couple things. One is to make sure that there's more public oversight, and I think the Public Service Board is hearing that. The other one is a suggestion that perhaps Vermont itself should own 50% of the transmission lines. I don't know how wise that is. They're having hearings on it right now. I haven't been involved in a lot of the hearings, but I know there are a lot of issues with that. So I'm not sure that I like having Quebec own our transmission lines and our power sources, but there are hearings going on right now, and I'm not as intimately involved. Mike might be more so because he's on the natural resources. He's on the Natural Resources Committee, so that's the committee that actually deals with this. I don't know where you are with hearings on that, but.
Does anyone have a question or a comment for Senator White? Mr. Fairman?
Senator White, just to clarify my question, I did not mention Velco, our transmission utility, because I wasn't thinking about that. What I was thinking about was we went from an era where the power companies own the generating plants to an era where they don't. And we are returning to an era when, if all of this falls under the control of the government of Quebec, they will control CDPS and GMP while owning Hydro-Quebec, which is selling the power to the above-mentioned utilities.
Right, and I have to admit that this is an issue that is complicated, and I haven't been taking much testimony. There is one thing that I think that we have to look at in our energy future, and that is what we've done over the past is we have huge generation plants, and then we have a lot of transmission lines, and that's the model that we've used. In most of Europe, that isn't the model that they use at all. What they do is they have much smaller, independent and individual generation, so you don't have the huge transmission issue. And I think we have to go in that direction more and more. There are small windmills, small solar panels that people can put on their houses and can put in their yards. And in my opinion, we need to go more in that direction, having communities. In Westminster, for example, we have a farm there, Goodell Farm, and I think they milk about 1,000 cows. You can imagine they have a lot of waste. And they have a methane generation there now, and they're producing enough electricity for about 200 homes in the area. And we need to do more of that kind of small community-based generation, in my opinion.
Not to refute what you just said, Senator, but at the same time, as people have to understand, there's a spinning reserve, and the spinning reserve is what kept the grid online for large, like New York, the last big New York blackout, is that spinning reserve is that huge mass of metal in the base-loaded generators turning. And what happens is, as the grid either goes up or down, and usually it's down, is that spinning reserve provides enough energy that it keeps it going for the few seconds that you need to rebound with all the rest of the controls, because every single generator in the United States is linked together. They're all synchronous. And when you see one generator go down, you see every generator basically change in speed. So what happens is, if we don't have the larger plants, a balance of small and large, it can't be all small, because it'll cascade and you'll fail the grid.
Right, I didn't mean to imply that we should go completely in that direction, because I don't think we should. Thanks, Mike.
Anyone else? Thank you, Senator White.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to the body the representative, and he is from here in Vernon, Mike Hebert.
Thank you all. This is my second town meeting as your representative, and I again would like to thank you all for sending me to Montpelier. It's a great honor to be there, and it's a great honor to represent the two towns that I represent, Guilford and Vernon. I must commend Jeanette, Senator White, for coming here to Vernon. With her position on the Vermont Yankee, it's very difficult. But what I've found in Montpelier is there are some people that are very honest and their integrity beyond reproach. We have a senator like that, Jeanette White, and it makes it easy to work with her. While Jeanette and I politically don't agree on many things, it is never personal, and it is always respectful. So I have the utmost respect for Jeanette, and her to come here and tell us her honest view on Vermont Yankee is to be commended, because we have people in the state that would never, ever do that. And as we know, our governor has come here and not been forthright about his position on Vermont Yankee. So we should really appreciate the honesty of our senator. Thank you. And I mentioned last year about the civility of Montpelier. I was very surprised about that. And it is civil. And most of the people up there, it is never personal. And people realize we don't agree on a particular topic, but let's go out and have dinner and resolve our issues. And it's a very pleasant place to work for the most part. Unfortunately, there are some members that if you disagree, it is a personal matter, or far worse. And what I've found, and I find it quite disturbing, is that some members, it's more important for them to vote to go back to Montpelier than to vote what they think is right. And again, I think we're fortunate. Jeanette never does that. She will cast a vote, and if her constituents don't send her back to Montpelier, she'll sleep with a clean conscience. And I try to emulate that same representation for our people. We are very lucky. While she's a Democrat,
Sorry.
in all honesty, she is the type of representative that we need. She's honest, and she brings it home. Unfortunately, she let the cat out of the bag that I'm on House Natural Resources and Energy. We'll deal with that in a minute. One of the things I wanted to mention tonight, a bill that we passed last year was net metering. And for people that don't understand what it is, I'll give it to you in a very brief model. If you want to generate electricity with a solar panel, and as anyone coming down Pond Road, you get down the bottom, next to the post office, you have the solar panel. It's on a, it moves, I can't, tracker. It's a solar tracker. And that actually moves and follows the sun. Well, that person is going to be generating electricity. And if they generate more than they're using, they actually sell power back to the power company, but it's done on a credit basis. They don't receive any cash. You're not going to get a cash payment for what you produce. You're going to receive credits, and those credits can be applied against your electric bill. When we passed that bill last year, I was a little disturbed because I was concerned if Mike Hebert has enough resource to put in a solar operation and generate excess power, I can take all the charges off my bill. That includes poles and wires, the money that it costs to deliver power to my house. And my problem with that was because Mike Hebert has a system, Chris Howe may be subsidizing me because she doesn't have a system. So somebody's got to pay for those poles and wires, and if I credit it off, my neighbor may see an increase to make up for that. Yet if one of those poles or wires falls in my yard, it will be repaired. So I was very concerned about that, and I worked with my committee this year, and we modified last year's net metering law that this year there's a study being done by the Department of Public Service, and what it's going to determine is, in fact, is there such a shift in cost, and if so, how much? And then what will happen is, if there is a cost like that, there will be a segment of somebody who is doing net metering, there will be a segment of their bill that they cannot write off. It's going to be their share for the transmission of electricity and that sort of thing. And we just wanted to bring fairness to it. One of the things I find extremely intriguing about net metering is I'm working presently with some folks in Montpelier and some folks with the Department of Ed. And what I was thinking about is net metering for the school. If we put a solar array here on the school, and I mentioned this over in Guilford, the time that you get the highest price or the most credits for your electrical generation is in the summer. Our lowest usage here at the school is in the summer. We have almost no electric need. So we would be generating electricity, excess electricity at the highest possible price. And what I want to look at is how much it would cost us to make that investment in the solar array, and then how much we could credit back to the school, and how much money it would actually save the taxpayers if we could be crediting some of our electric bills. Because our electric bills here at the school are quite high. So I'm a bit excited about that, and I've also explored that we could possibly make it a net metering system, group metering system, which would include the town hall. So we are looking at that. I'm hoping to have some answers by end of session. And again, that would be something that we would be looking at next town meeting. So we have plenty of time to do a study and find out how much it would cost and would it be feasible for us to do that. There are some schools doing it up north, and it has proved very, very effective for them. And there are also some schools up north that hasn't proved to be effective. And that's one of the reasons we have to find out why that is. You know, and at this point, no one could tell us. But I did drive by one of the schools, and I think part of the problem is they're along a tree line, and it looks great in winter. But in the summertime, that tree line is probably shading a lot of their panels. So we'll do research into that. But I find that tremendously exciting that we have the potential to save some money here at the school. We've done a lot here at the school saving money already in efficiencies. If you go into our gym, you'll notice when you walk in the gym, the lights now come on. And there are different type of lighting. They're far more efficient. The old mercury lighting that we had in there, when it would come on, and I was flabbergasted to hear this, when it would come on, it cost us about $75 for the lights to warm up every day. And then we never shut them off because we didn't want to turn them back on all the time in the gym, and that would just drive that cost up. So those very, very expensive, very, very inefficient lights were running constantly. So we've improved that. But you know, efficiency will help us. But I think this net metering project, if we could do it, would be very beneficial. There are some other issues in front of my committee. We talked about renewable energy, solar and wind and those sorts of things. We have, it's called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which we had submitted a bill from our, the chair of our committee actually submitted the bill. And it came before our committee, and then the administration stepped in. So the bill is being rewritten. We'll see it all new next week. But essentially what the goal is, 75% of our electricity will be renewable electricity by 2035. I don't think it's a realistic goal. We've taken a lot of testimony on it. And the problem with that goal is a majority of that power would be intermittent generation, which is wind and solar, which are very, very expensive power sources. And to use them to make them base load, as Mike alluded to make them base load, you have to have a battery storage system. And a battery storage system costs 24 cents a kilowatt to operate and maintain, which is tremendously, tremendously expensive. I don't know how to calculate it. Mike might know how to calculate that. $24 a megawatt. $24 a megawatt. So you can see that's just to store the power. That doesn't go with the 27 cents you're paying for the solar power. So it would be very, very expensive. And if you don't do that, you destabilize the grid because you have this power that's jumping back and forth. And right now, the testimony we had was that at best, you could use 20% intermittent power and not destabilize the grid. And that would be the best you could do. So we're a long way from looking at that goal. So we really need to continue to look at what we have for base load, whether it's nuke, whether it's hydro, or biomass. We have to have a really substantial base load portfolio. And talking with people from IBM, I was very shocked. They spend $35 million a year on electricity. And they have a program every year where they have an efficiency goal every year to be 4% more efficient than the year before, and they've been doing that for 8 years. So they're very, very efficient. And if they were a utility, they'd be the second largest utility in the state with their substation. They do a lot of things. So they're very worried about where we go with this portfolio standard, because a slight increase, if you're paying $35 million a year, you get a 10% increase in electricity, you're talking very serious money. And at this point, they're very worried about base load energy, because they make these little wafer things for computers. They call them wafers. I don't know what they actually are, but they call them wafers. And their power costs in Vermont are so much, they take the wafers and send them to Ontario to be tested, because their energy rate out there is 50% of what they pay in Vermont. And then they ship them back, which you figure all that shipping them, and they're still saving money over what we're paying for power presently. So that's not very friendly. But the thing they're most concerned about is if they have an interruption in power, and it's 2 milliseconds. I don't know what 2 milliseconds is, but that's pretty quick, I would imagine. 2 millionths of a second. Thank you. Well, if they have that interruption, that's worth about $1 million to them. Because if that interrupts when they're in the process of putting those wafers through, they have to throw them all away. So they need dependable baseload constant energy. So they're very worried about where the direction we're going in. So those are the two things on the energy side, and we've just passed out a solid waste bill, which over a period of time, a problem that we have in Vermont was we have 2 landfills left, and Moortown is the one that's going to be closing. They have a permit that expires in about 18 months, and it doesn't appear that the state is going to give them another permit. So we have to do things with our waste products other than send them to the landfill. One of the things I found interesting is, thanks to Mike Quartermarsh, Vernon's kind of ahead of the game. We have a cow program here over at the town. So we're already doing a lot of things that the bill is going to require us to do. But some of the things will be, there will be no more organics going into your landfills. That's your food waste and things like that. It's not going to prohibit people from still having their backyard composting piles, anything like that. You're still going to be free to do those things. You're just not going to be able to send your waste food to your landfill. But if you have a bakery and you have leftover product, you can still send that to either human consumption at a food bank or to a farm, or you can send it to composting. So it's not going to be a giant change, but it is heading in the direction of more recycling and more useful use of our waste. We're not going to be throwing away resources. And one of the resources we throw away right now is plastics. When you're on my committee, you find out so many things that you never thought you'd ever want to know, but you do find them out. And one of them is the plastics. There's such a huge market for like Coca-Cola, Pepsi bottles. There's such a big market for Pepsi bottles that the Chinese are just buying them up at an incredible rate, and right now they're extremely valuable. They're a commodity. So places want them. The redemption centers want them. The recycling centers want them. So it's a very, very valuable resource, and we've been throwing it away. So that's the direction that this bill wants to head in. I had reapportionment down here, and thank you, Jet, you covered that, so we spare you some time. And one of the other issues, it's not in my committee, is there's a bill that would have our tax payment go directly to the state rather than to our local tax collectors. And there's been some consternation about that. I've heard from a lot of different folks that they're worried, can the state handle that workload? Can the state efficiently handle it? How does it affect people with escrow accounts for their mortgage? And one of the questions I asked is, when our BCA gives somebody a rebate on their taxes, how does that get related to the state? So there's a great number of questions right now, and I know most of our tax collectors on the town level do not see it as a very good idea. And one of the items that they're concerned about is something they call a float. When we collect taxes, it goes into the bank, or wherever it goes. CD, I don't know what they do with it, but it's set aside, and it gains some interest. And that's called the float before the check is cut to go to the state. Well, your towns would no longer receive that float. And in some places, that's a significant amount of money. So, you know, there are a lot of concerns, but it is a bill that there's still a lot of questions about, and hopefully we get answers for. And unfortunately, one of the issues I'm having in Montpelier is transparency at the moment, because we passed a health care bill that no one can really answer a question about. It's problematic that we aren't getting answers to a lot of questions. And I asked numerous questions. As you know, Deb and I have been in the healthcare field for years. She does practice management and medical billing. So we had a lot of questions and a lot of knowledge to bring to the conversation. And so we asked a lot of questions. And unfortunately, many of them couldn't be answered. What it's going to cost, what the coverage is going to look like, who's going to be covered, who's not going to be covered. There are a lot of moving parts with this thing. Again, what I found troubling is there was one representative that, in explaining his vote, and I took his explanation off the journal, and he's not the norm, but this is a conversation that during the debate was frequently heard. He's a member of the Healthcare Committee, and what he said was, it's frustrating to deal with, we just don't know. With that, I'm going to vote for it. But I can honestly say there's a lot of it I don't understand. I understand them in concept, but just don't know how all the pieces are to work, or if they will work, or fill in until we get some of these big questions answered. We have a U.S. Supreme Court decision this summer. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that I don't know. And there's a pause. But yes, I'll be voting for it. So that to me is a concern. My response when I explained my vote on the exchange, and quite honestly, I think the exchange is a good idea. And I tried to make a couple of amendments to improve on what the exchange is going to be. I wanted to, instead of the community rating, I wanted an adjusted community rating, which would allow far more companies to get into the exchange. So I was hoping to do that, but we're going to have a very limited exchange. And my response and explanation to voting no on the exchange bill was, the last time we tried a blind faith health care plan, it was the Catamount plan. Many members of this body expressed the same concerns and asked the same questions that we have asked now. Catamount passed with many unanswered questions about cost and sustainability. Catamount failed. The governor's inauguration address said the Catamount failed. House 559 is another blind faith healthcare scheme destined for failure. House 559 asks that we blindly place our faith and trust in the government and trust the government to take care of us. I cannot support the blind faith approach in healthcare planning for the following reasons. I do not know what I don't know. But I do know some of what we don't know. We don't know the cost, we don't know who's covered, we don't know what the coverage is, and we don't know about the waivers from the federal government. Most importantly, no one can explain to me the true impact on my constituents. Will this bill harm them or help them? And I think that was the feeling of many of my peers. The good thing, and I must admit, and there's always conflict between the House and the Senate, the upper body and the lower chamber, but one of the things that I've found to be most beneficial is the Senate is a much smaller deliberative body, and they tend to be more united on decisions that they make. And things like this occur less frequently. Like there's a concern I do have with the solid waste bill, and I spoke with Jeanette about it. And the Senate can take that same bill and modify it and change the bill, and then the two bodies have to get together and agree on what those changes are. So with these concerns, I share them with the Healthcare Committee of the Senate, and changes can be made. So I must admit, grudgingly, that the Senate is an easier group to deal with just because of the sheer smaller numbers. So, now, there were some questions about energy. All right? And I have one statement about Vermont Energy. All right, I gotta get rid of this.
I want to make sure I do the absolute correct numbers. I don't want to be wrong on this. Okay.
Jeanette and I differ on Vermont Yankee. I'm a very ardent supporter of the plant. My contention is I will always support the plant until someone can indicate to me that it's unsafe. I look at the economics and I look at the power that it generates. It gives us good, efficient, safe baseload power. One of the things that's been occurring in the House, and the Senate had a bill to tax Yankee, is I think there is, and I've said this both on television, well, television, radio, and in the press, that at this point in time there is some treatment of Vermont Yankee that is punitive and vindictive. In saying so, one of the things that will be coming up next week when we return is the fee bill. And in the fee bill, there's an item for the discharge, the water discharge at Vermont Yankee. And currently, Vermont Yankee pays $105,000 a year to discharge water, the green in the plant, put it back into the river. It's $105,000 a year. A few years ago, it was only 20-something thousand, but with the upgrade, they agreed to pay more. This year, the administration decided to make that fee $543,000, a 417% increase in that line item. That's $438,000 more. My contention is, the attitude is if you can't force them out of business through the legislature or with the state, you'll force them out of business financially. I think it's appalling that they do that, and even more appalling is I asked an attorney from the Natural Resources Department, or Natural Resources Agency, to supply me the justification. A fee is different from a tax. That's another thing I disagree with. I think if it's coming out of my pocket, fee or tax, it's a tax. But there is a definition, and a fee is a payment for services rendered. So what I asked the attorney was, can you explain to me what services have been rendered to justify that increase? And he started talking about the NIPD's permit, which is a federal permit. And I said, well, no, because the NIPD's permit is a bill back, so if the company is paid, if you've got to bring in specialists, the company has to pay for that already. So he told me 5 weeks ago he would get back to me. He's yet to do that. But last week, the commissioner for the Department of Environmental Conservation sat before the House Ways and Means Committee and was asked, can you justify this fee? And he said, I can't answer that because it's a matter of attorney-client privilege. Whereupon the committee was a little annoyed and wants to know what the fee is. So we'll see this adventure carried out next week. The committee, bipartisan committee, their reaction was such that the administration came back the following day and said, well, we'll cut it in half. But that's still 200%, and the committee's position is, even if it's 10%, we asked the Department of Motor Vehicles to justify their increase in driver license fees. So you need to justify this. So we'll see how that plays out, what's going to happen with it. But again, I maintain that it's a punitive behavior. Just as there was a tax bill that was submitted, it hasn't gone anywhere, but it was to support the Clean Energy Development Fund. But the amount of tax was on the dry cask storage at the plant, $2 million of cash, which presently there's 9, so there'd be $18 million for that, and a volumetric measurement of the pool where the rods are stored in the reactor building, and that would have been approximately another $18 million, and $25 million annually for closure. Significant increase of what they pay now. And that was going to be divided 17% to the general fund, 11% to the education fund, 6% to Vernon, and 66% to the Clean Energy Development Fund. And so far, Vermont Yankee has been the sole funder of the Clean Energy Development Fund. And over the past 6 years, they've put approximately $29 million into that fund. So what we did is we looked at the numbers that were in that tax bill and said, what would this put into the Clean Energy Development Fund over that same amount of time, 6 years? It would be $283 million. Right now, $28 million over 6 years going to $283 million. So I think there are some things that are punitive, vindictive, arbitrary, capricious, however you want to define it, they're not right. Though that bill has not moved anywhere, but those are the types of things that we have to be concerned with. And that's something that Jeanette and I would disagree strongly on. But again, you know, it's an honest debate, and it never interferes with our working relationship, and we work closely on other things.
Who's initiating the bill?
The one in the House was the...
I'm sorry.
Mr. King, if you could wait till Mr. Ebert's done, we'll have questions and comments then.
Okay, and I'm just about complete. I think I've covered everything I want to cover, because I know Mr. Freeman probably has a couple of questions he asked earlier. So, sure, if you want to open the questions, it is getting late, and we don't want to stay here all night, so.
At this time, Representative Hebert will take questions and comments. Would anyone like to speak? Mr. King, please wait for the microphone and identify yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Sal. Who initiated the bill? I'm just interested if there's a coalition or individual, or where it's coming from, to kind of identify.
Well, the Senate says it's coming from the administration, but the sponsor of the bill was the chairman of my committee, Tony Klein. I don't know who sponsored it in the House, in the Senate.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but there were two bills virtually, well, they were almost identical, and what adds to my suspicion is one bill had a post-closure fee in it, and the other bill didn't. So one spoke to continued operation and taxing them, the other one if they were closed and taxing them. So it looked like there was a two contingency plan going on. So. But yeah, it came from the chair of my committee, Representative Klein from Montpelier, East Montpelier. Anything else? Oh, okay.
Mr. Pond, and please wait for the microphone.
Mike, this has got nothing to do with Vermont Yankee. I was wondering, about 2 years ago, the state changed the policy as far as deductions on property tax for disabled American veterans, 70% or better unemployable permanent and total. At the point before that, it was at 10,000. Now it's at 40,000. I was wondering, do you know anything about who changed the rules? Now, what I mean by change the rules is the Department of Veterans Affairs used to send us our letters telling us what our eligibility was, and we would deliver it personally to the lister's office. Now, this year in January, we get a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs in Montpelier telling us we need to sign this paper, send it back to them, and they will send the paper of our eligibility to the lister's office. Now, this paper was signed, sent back. Then they sent me another paper that says, okay, now we want a letter that tells us how much money you make as a disabled veteran. Now, why do they need to know how much money a disabled veteran makes. The question is not how much he makes. The question is his percentage and is he eligible for the $40,000 minus off his land and property tax. So can you shed some light on that somewhere? Why do they need to know how much money we make?
Actually, I'm not familiar with that at all, but my assumption would be they would make some sort of an adjustment on payment. I don't know, but maybe, Jeanette, would you know from Government Ops?
I think that the, okay, my dad told me that I should have been a public speaker before they invented PA systems because I have such a loud voice, but I believe that the reason for doing that is because in many cases, a veteran is better off taking the rebate program that is offered by the state in terms of the percentage of your income that you pay for your property taxes rather than taking the deduction off your property tax, off the appraisal first. So I would suspect that's probably why. I can't say for sure, but we can check that out and find out. But I think that that's probably why.
George, we will check and find out. We'll get an answer for you. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Bob.
Hi.
Mr. Mike Ball.
Mike Ball. I just wanted to clarify that Dave Andrews texted me and said I was off by a factor of 10 when you said 24. It's actually $240 per megawatt hour, and with the $270 megawatt hour, that would mean the electrical and the battery is 510. This is important. In 510 megawatts per dollar, $510 per megawatt hour, and currently we are paying $50 a megawatt hour for both Hydro-Quebec and Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Corporation. So when you look at that, 50 versus $510, that's really significant.
And that's why IBM is worried.
Would anyone else like to comment or question? 1 second, Mr. Fairman has not spoken yet. And Mr. Hubert, I'll follow with you. Mr. Fairman.
Representative Ebert, before you were elected, I attended a candidates forum in Guilford with your opponent, and I recall being impressed at that time with how well informed you are on so many subjects, and I'm even more impressed now. You certainly distinguish yourself in the
I wish my wife were here to hear this.
Well, I should tell her I said no. With the breadth and depth of your knowledge and how you're always learning more. Clearly, you're very interested and inquisitive about everything regarding your job and I guess life itself. And I congratulate you on this.
Thank you.
You mentioned, you alluded to the questions I asked earlier. You know, we know where you stand on Yankee. Concerning the other question, though, I won't repeat the question in details, but the end of it was, for what you experienced in the legislature, do they really understand that we are preparing to give control of a large part of our energy future to a foreign government?
I believe they do. There's been lots of discussion on it, both in the House and the Senate. Vince Aluzzi, when you talked about the Velco lines, has talked about Vermont not having ownership of the companies, but having a major share in those companies so that we would have a say in the policies of the companies. And as Jeanette rightly pointed out, those details are all now with the Public Service Board, but you are free to let the Public Service Board know your views and your opinions on it, because they will take testimony. It's an open docket. And many members of the legislature have expressed those views to the Public Service Board. We are deeply concerned with who is controlling our power sources. And one of my things is a more practical, basic concern is weather. And if you recall, a few years ago, we had that big ice storm. It was nice to have CVPS and those guys running around down here, Green Mountain Power, fixing all the lines and everything. If you have a sovereign nation controlling that operation, and Quebec has that same problem, where are they going to send the trucks? And that's one of the things that the Public Service Board has to deal with as an issue. Contractually, what guarantees do we get for service? So it's an enormous consideration, and many members of the, it's not a partisan issue. Many members, both sides of the aisle, deeply concerned about this, as well as citizens of Vermont should watch it closely.
Mr. Duckley.
Jeff Duckley. Thanks for coming here tonight, Mike. Just, I guess, a comment to make, continuing on the issue of Quebec. I'm not sure how likely the possibility is, but Quebec certainly had enough discussion over the years of seceding from Canada, and I guess that would be one additional concern on top of a sovereign nation controlling our energy in our state is that outside possibility.
It is a consideration, and Vernon is considered seceding from Vermont and becoming part of Hinsdale. They'd like our grand list.
Bill Hammond, one of the listers. You're raising, you're raising more concern because a few years ago we had to go up and fight one of the committees up there that wanted to put all transmission lines to network, which takes away the tax revenue from all the different towns. Our town at that point was going to lose a few $1,000s. And they were going to pass this bill without any public knowledge. I happened to got wind of it through Valor. And while Velco was doing their work, and then Velco had agreed they were going to, as the towns lose their money by going to network, that the new work that Velco was being done was going to offset it so nobody would be aware of what's happening. And we fought that, and it got laid to rest. And I've been concerned that it's going to come back and haunt us. And if the state gets involved and wants to own transmission lines, that's going to be one of the first things they're going to want to do, is go to network with all of the other transmission lines, which is going to affect most of the southern part of Vermont. The other thing I like to say, for this lady over here, is I don't understand why they don't realize that Vermont Yankee, as long as it's safe to operate, if they prematurely close it down, it's going to have to be sitting and sort of mothballed because there's not enough money to do a full decommissioning. Whereas, as long as it's safe, they should let it keep operating until there's enough funds in there to decommission. That's one thing. Vermont Yankee, from our contractor that we've had, that worked with our town on helping us to come up with the values on that. This is one of the smallest plants in the country. Per kilowatt, or per megawatt, however they read it, is the heaviest taxed of any of the other ones. In other words, Vermont has more, the state of Vermont has more than taken its fair share. And I know at a committee a number of years ago, someone forecasted that they were going to use economics to close it down if they couldn't do it some other way. And when you look at all the things that, the hoops that they've made Vermont Yankee, and all the donations that they've made them, and usually that donation goes up north, it doesn't stay down here. So my concern is that they are not thinking with a logical mind. They're just thinking from the real left wing instead of being practical about it. They're letting their bias control what is best for the state of Vermont. And anyways, I'd just like to make that clear that Vermont Yankee has a very safe record. Any little thing that goes wrong that is not a big issue, the media blows it all out of proportion. And just the thing we saw on the news that was so biased against Vermont Yankee, and they were using unrealistic things to plant the mind into the people who are less fortunate to get themselves educated on the issues, to make them biased. But anyways, I just want to make that statement. I'd like to have that considered, that rather than shut them down prematurely, as long as they're safe, let them run so they can build up this fund so that the money will be there when decommission time comes. Thank you.
Okay. It is getting late, so I'd like to wind this up. Anybody, I will stay after and talk to anybody on any topic. In closing, what I would like to say is, as Jeanette alluded to, we serve on committees. The Senate serves on 2 because they're low numbers. They have to serve on more than one committee. I serve on 1, which actually creates a tremendous amount of work as a representative or as a senator, because not only do you have to know what's going on in your committee, you have to know what's going on in the other committees, and you live in kind of a silo. You know everything that's going on in your committee, but you do have to go out and seek information from other people. And I will bump into Jeanette in the halls and say, what's going on in your committee in the Senate, so that I can be well-versed, or as well-versed as possible, and bring information back. But what you need to know is, this year when I was leaving, the last bill to come on the floor to be sent to committee was Bill 769. So there's 769 bills this year. So if I can't answer a question, or if another representative or senator can't answer a question, it's not because they're asleep at the switch. It's just they have to look it up, get back to you, because living in that silo, I don't know what's going on in government ops until I talk to somebody from there, and it is very difficult. Fortunately, we do get a lot of help from the folks. We have some assistants up in Montpelier. We don't have a staff. We don't have an office. We have a house lounge or legislative lounge. It's got some computers, and it's an area that only legislators can go into, so it gives you some downtime so you can do some research and things. But our staff is us, and if we're fortunate enough, or Vernon, we have some folks on retainer from Vernon that assist tremendously in what I do up there. They're very, very helpful. The last comment I would have to make would be about fundraising, the license plate. I would encourage people to buy the license plate. As I used to have my Semper Fi plate, I know a lot of the police officers in the state of Vermont do not like the idea of covering that front plate. What I used to do with my Semper Fi plate, until somebody misappropriated it, was I would bolt it above my license plate. It's just the 2 top screws attached to the bottom of that plate up. But what I thought would have been a better plate would have been a replica of the cruiser door. You all familiar with the cruiser door? How many of you would have paid $25 for a replica of that door? That'd raise some money. So, that being said, thank you all for your attention, and thank you for being patient with the lady.
Thank you, Senator White and Representative Hebert. Let's get down to business. I believe that we are ready to take up Article 26. Article 25. Is there a motion? Thank you. And please all bear with me. It's a learning curve. Mr. Moderator. Oh, okay. Okay, here's Article 26. I'm sorry, Article 25, which I have on my finger, and thank you again. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to replenish the professional service fund.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to replenish the professional services fund.
It has been moved and seconded to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to replenish the professional service fund. Is there discussion? I see no discussion. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And Article 25 has been passed. The town will raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Did you actually call the question before you called for the vote?
I asked if there was any discussion, and I received no response to that.
And I raised my hand.
After I had already said, is there any discussion to this?
Which is exactly the point where one says yes.
I believe it was after the fact that I saw your card go up. I think I had already called for the vote at that point.
Okay, I move to reconsider.
Second.
We will reconsider Article 25 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to replenish the professional service fund. Is there discussion? Mr. King, please rise and turn on the mic and identify yourself.
I apologize for not being prepared, but my question is, what is the professional services?
The board is queried. Sorry?
No, we had point of order in the fact that what we did, there was a motion and a second to reconsider, we have to vote to reconsider, then we go back, and then we have questions on the motion.
Okay, so we are now, just for clarification, and thank you again, thank you, Mr. King, we are now considering whether we are going to reconsider. And do I need a motion on that?
There was already
Is there a motion? And do I a second? And a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Nay. The nays have it. And we will now proceed to Article 26. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be placed in the previously established reappraisal fund. Yes.
We actually voted on 25 already?
Yes.
Yes, we did, and then we voted.
Thank you. That was quick.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Madam Health.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be placed in the previously established reappraisal fund. This fund will not be expended until the town votes to authorize a reappraisal.
Second.
Discussion. Ms. Jobin, please wait for the microphone, rise, and identify yourself, please.
Faith Johan. On page 8, it has the reappraisal fund, and there's already $72,000 in there. Do we need to put that much more in?
The board is queried.
I would like to direct that question to the chairman of the listers, Mr. Hammond.
Bill Hammond, lister. The last reappraisal cost us $159,000. We have roughly $73,000 in there now. We're going to need more money, and the money doesn't go as far anymore. So, I mean, when it comes time to do a reappraisal, it's going to have to be done or the town's penalized. So we need more money. Even this won't be enough. I mean, last time it cost $159,000 to do a town-wide reappraisal.
Further discussion? Mr. Fairman.
This is a small point. On the warrant, it does not actually say that this fund will not be expended. It says this fund will to be expended, which of course is the opposite meaning. Do we need to amend it, or does it, or is it okay for it to stand as read without being formally amended?
The board's query?
By voting, by passing this, you have said then that this fund will not be expended until the town votes to authorize the reappraisal. It will be done for this town. But I did have a question, and
One second, please.
I would like to ask Mr. Hammond when the next reappraisal would be.
Mr. Hammond is queried.
Our town, we've been averaging around 10 years for a reappraisal, but a lot of towns, 3 years to 5 years, and a lot of it depends on economics. And what we've seen in the market right now, we are actually at 110%. In other words, our reappraisal that was done a few years ago, because of the drop in the market, we're actually pretty safe right now for a few years, or until the market changes. But we're at about 110%. And at 80%, we're penalized by the state. So.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 25 to see if the town will vote to raise, I'm sorry, I'm on 26. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be placed in the previously established reappraisal fund. This fund will not be. No, okay. So for clarification, the article now reads.
No, when I read.
We've stricken that from. Okay.
I read, this fund will not be expended until the town votes to authorize the reappraisal.
Correct.
That's what we're voting.
So I will read from this. To see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $30,000 to be placed in the previously established reappraisal fund. This fund will not be expended until the town votes to authorize a reappraisal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the article passed. On to Article 27. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $43,357 to fund the unfunded liability portion of the retirement fund.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Ball.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $43,357 to fund the unfunded liability portion of the retirement fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion?
I'd like to speak to the motion.
Mr. Ball.
Provide real quick is that we have actuarial services to make sure that we have enough money set aside for the retirement fund for the town employees. We do that every 2 years. This past year, the actuarial services, the people that perform the actuarial services and had performed it in the past, basically stopped performing that service. We ended up going out for bid. We ended up taking on the company that basically they provide that support services from the institution that currently holds the money. They are in the process of doing going back and looking at and doing an appraisal of the performance of the actuarials before, looking at all of the information and making an evaluation of what our unfunded liability is going to be. When you look at this amount, this is what we put aside for the last 2 years of 2010 and 2011. We have not gotten that report back yet, but because of the way the market has been going, we felt that if we did not take the opportunity to incrementally try to catch up, we were going to be in trouble. So that's the reason why the amount is the same for this. This is going to be the 3rd year in a row. But based on what we're seeing and as far as the market and the performance of the fund, we expected is that there will be some unfunded liability that we will have to cover. And it is imperative that we as a town ensure that there is enough money to pay for the retirement of the workers when it comes time for them to retire.
Thank you. Discussion? Brianna? Ron?
Good evening, Ron Zlakavar. Mr. Ball, it's not imperative, it's legal. Federal law says we have to fund it. I don't know what the law is, but when I was working down in Washington, D.C. for the National Education Association, I was told by a colleague who is very experienced in retirement funds that the law is that we have to, all our retirement funds have to be fully funded. If they're not, so it's, I was going to ask you a question about that, but I just wanted to let you know.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Fairman.
First, on what page in the town report can we find the statement of the retirement fund? I can't see the
Board is queried.
As I said, the actuarials and the new actuarial services company is performing the review, and when it comes in, we will then make that available.
Okay, that wasn't...
I believe, Mr. Fairman, you may have a follow-up, please.
Well, that wasn't quite the question I asked, but that's okay. Two other points. Did I understand that our former actuary said everything was okay, but the new actuary says they're not?
The board is clear.
That's not what I said.
Please clarify.
I said that in the past that the actuarials have made the report, the select board as well as the human resources director for the town, we took a look at that. As far as the unfunded portion, based on market performance in the past, we made an educated guess that we were going to make up a certain amount of that based on market performance. So when we put the money aside, we weren't trying to make it all up with taxpayer money. We were going to make some of it up in the lost interest, because if you don't have that principal, you're losing interest on the money. So as the market recovered, the $43,357 that was put away in 2010, 2011, and now in 2012 will make up for the lost interest. And then once the actuarials complete their study, we'll know as far as how far we're off, or if we're basically completely funded.
No, you're referring to the market recovery.
Mr. Fairman, is this a follow-up question?
Yeah.
Or is it
It is to clarify what Mr.
a
Ball
clarification? Okay.
Now, Mr. Ball, you have referred to the market recovery, which of course leads us to assume that the pension funds for the town of, for employees of the town of Vernon are invested in the stock market. Is that true?
The board is queried. And I believe that the information for the fund is on page 16. That's what the board has passed on.
It doesn't say there what the investments are.
I was just giving information to a question that was asked earlier. Your query is with the board and they will respond. The board is queried if the retirement fund, about how it is invested.
We'll have to follow up on that separately. I don't have that information. Unless you can answer it.
Thank you, sir. The reason
The treasurer, Mr. Fairman, you have something on the floor that we're trying to get the answer to right now, so please. Town treasurer, Ms. Query.
Currently, the town employee pension fund is invested with People's Bank, and we have certain criteria that the bank follows with A-rated, AAA-rated securities, and what am I going to say? We do have an investment policy that we follow, and I have that in my office. You can certainly come in and see it, but it is safe. It isn't in the stock market in volatile funds at all. I wanted to clarify something that Mike said. In 2009, we did have an actuarial study done by our former actuary, and at that time, our unfunded liability was quite large. We needed $818,000. And this is when we started funding it at $43,357. Currently, we have $674,813. So we still obviously need to make up that unfunded liability. We do have a new actuary. There is a study being done right now as we speak. Hopefully, we will get that result, and we will have that result at our next town meeting.
There's further discussion. If not, we will see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $43,357 to fund the unfunded liability portion of the retirement fund. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Article 28, to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 for a town picnic.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 for a town picnic.
Discussion. Seeing no discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Please rise, state your name.
Our partner, I thought we voted last year to go away with the town picnic because of expenses, lack of interest, 2 years, thank you. Lack of interest, no committee, trying to get volunteers, the amount of turnout. The only part of the town picnic that really seemed to generate anybody was the fireworks. And I'm just curious if, is there a committee that's still trying to do this? Or if not, let's just vote this down and don't bring it up again. I'm sorry.
The board is queried. Mr. Portamarch.
In answer to that, there have been a lot of people who've come to the board in board meetings and previously at the candidates forum that we just had a couple of weeks ago who have expressed an interest in bringing back the town picnic. There was a feeling that there was a loss of community and things of that nature, and they asked if we could bring it back. And the point was that we would try and form a committee here tonight to move forward if the voters so choose to bring this back.
Further discussion? Mr. Fairman.
What do we get for the $5,000?
The board is queried.
I guess that depends on what the committee comes up with. In the past, we have received a generous donation from Mtg, who have taken care of the fireworks. The fire department has also helped with that, so depending upon their availability, I can't speak for the fire department, but there's just been a tremendous amount of support to bring this back, and that's why we're bringing it up here at the town meeting.
Further discussion? Ms. Howe?
I'd like to just say that I have talked to a few people as well that have mentioned maybe a parade or something too. And I'd kind of like to see something like that, a parade again. It was wonderful to see our fire department, our police department, the old cars, horses, whatever. So I'm going to try to get that off the ground, something that I'm going to work on. But it's separate, but it could be combined with the town picnic.
Thank you, Mrs. Howe. Any further? Mr. Andrews.
Thank you. David Andrews. Just to give some clarification, in the past, as Chairman stated, Mtg provided funds for the fireworks. There's been a perception, I think a misperception to some degree, that the fire department did the fireworks. I just want to clarify that. There are currently 2 people in the room who have federal alcohol, tobacco, and firearms permits to deal with Class 1 explosives, which happen to be fireworks. You receive specialized training for Atlas fireworks and have to be employees part-time during the year for Atlas fireworks. They also happen to be members of the fire department. In years past, we've had 4 or 5 people who have been members of the fire department who provide that service. The committee, called the picnic committee, contracts with Atlas Fireworks to put on the fireworks. They provide a senior licensed person, and we provide a bunch of manpower for what turns out to be about minimum wage to set it all up. And that helps us get a lot more, literally, a lot more bang for the buck. Sorry. The fire department proper's involvement has been providing protection to make sure we don't burn the field down. We get the parking with the maximum number of people in the space. But the fire department hasn't really done fireworks. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Any further discussion? Mr. Warren?
Yeah, do it.
Seeing no further discussion, a motion has been made and seconded to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 for a town picnic. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it, and the motion has been moved. Article 29, to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for the previously established Alice J. Brooks Fund.
Madam Moderator,
Mr. Cordelich.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for the previously established Alice J. Brooks Fund.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there discussion? Not seeing any. A motion has been made and seconded to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $7,000 for the previously established Alice J. Brooks Fund. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Article 29 has passed. On to Article 30, to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $35,000 for a town-wide audit.
Madam Moderator,
Mr. Bordeman.
I move that the town raise and appropriate the sum of $35,000 for a town-wide audit.
The motion has been made and seconded to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $35,000 for a town-wide audit. Is there discussion? Mr. Vernon.
I support this motion because the last time we had an independent audit by certified public accountants was in 2002, 10 years ago. And more frequent independent accounting audits are customary in all organizations that are entrusted with other people's money. Now, of course, since 2002, our elected auditors have checked handling of our money by our town and school for errors, omissions, and misappropriation, and they are honest and hardworking. But of course, the basic question, the fundamental question is, who checks their work? Now, it's interesting, on page 50, we find that Peachack and Company, certified public accountants, say that they have prepared the financial statements for the school. Now, last evening, Mrs. Hebert, school board member Hebert, I understood her to say that they have audited the school's accounts. Now, surprisingly, if that's true, there is no auditor's letter in here as from Peachack saying that they've edited them, and the usual thing, you know, we found they were okay. So I guess I have two basic questions here.
Excuse me, one question at a time, please.
Okay, Part A and Part B, which are first...
You may have one question and a follow-up.
Well, we shall see how this works. I'll state the question and you can object to it if you feel it would be appropriate. I really think you should let me ask the question first. My question is Peachack and Company in fact auditing the accounts of the Vernon Town School District.
End of question, and I will end you there, and you query the school board, and then you may have a follow-up. Mr. You can't query on the appraisal of that? Town School Board Representative Ebert is here.
We have had the audit done by P-Check. We do that on an annual basis at the school, as well as having checks and balances on a regular basis with our internal people. And then Sally has the report here with her. The town report is not always all-encompassing with all the information that the town could possibly have, but we do have the audit on hand if you'd like to take a look at it. It is done annually, and it was just, that piece was not put into the report at this time, but we also received the report rather late, and just like our budget, sometimes there's a crunch between the deadline to get things published and when we receive information. So at times you're selective as to about what you're going to submit because there's a time crunch. But the audit has been done, it's done on an annual basis, and we do have the report here if you'd like to look at it.
And Mr. Vernon, your follow-up?
Well, therefore, since the school district is being audited annually, as Mr. Hebert has said, my question, therefore, is when we refer to a town-wide audit in the article, what does that mean? Does that mean school and town, or does it mean just the town? Town-wide, in my opinion, is unclear here, and that in turn relates to what how much we're getting for $35,000.
The board is queried.
It would simply be a town-side audit, not including the school.
Mr. Ebert would like to comment?
There's often a misconception when people talk about town and school. What people have to bear in mind is that in the state of Vermont, they are two separate municipalities, totally, completely separate, autonomous from one another. So the school department doing an audit is doing its fiduciary duties to the school district, which is separate from the town. They have to do their own audit.
Thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Dunkley.
Definitely. Mike, may I ask how much the school pays annually for their audit?
Town treasurer is queried.
The 2011 cost was $8,500.
Thank you. Further discussion? I'm sorry, the board, Mr. Quartermine, would like to talk to the question.
In anticipation of maybe the next question, the reason why there's a discrepancy between $8,500 and $35,000 is we haven't done an audit on the town side for over 10 years, so there would be much more to go through. That figure was a quote that was received through, you got that received from the check. So based on the length of time since the last audit, that's what they quoted.
Okay. Further discussion? Ms. Jones.
Since it was 10 years ago, do you think maybe it'd be more feasible for us to do it yearly like the school does, so we wouldn't be paying so much money?
The board is queried. Mr. Quartermine.
Yes, I do think it would be feasible to do it on a regularly scheduled basis. And I can't answer as to why it hasn't been done regularly.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Newton, please rise and wait for the microphone.
Phyllis Newton. Just one comment on the municipal side. There is no legal requirement that they have to do an outside audit. There's several towns that have never done them, and then there are several that do them annually. The only requirement to have one done is if the town receives $500,000 annually, or in 1 year from federal resources. So I'm assuming that this year will be, a lot of towns will definitely have to do outside audits because of Irene. That would not be our case, but there will be a lot of outside audits because of FEMA.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Is there further discussion? Motion has been made and seconded to see if the town will raise and appropriate the sum of $35,000 for a townwide audit. All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Moving on to Article 31. To see if the town will raise $1,925,078.32 and appropriate the sum of $2,377,955 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year. Ms. Mann-Powell.
I move that the town raise $1,925,078.32 and appropriate $2,377,955 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to see if the town will raise the sum of $1,925,078.32 and appropriate the sum of $2,377,955 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year. Is there discussion? Town treasurer is notice.
Madam Moderator, I would like to make an amendment to this. I would like to move that the town raise $1,939,976.32 and appropriate $2,392,853 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year. And I do wish to speak to my motion. While doing budgeting, waiting for an answer about where to place copying of town records in the budget, it was inadvertently left out of the budget. The cost that we want to add to the budget would be $14,898 for 2 individuals to copy, scan, and prepare our records. I guess that's all.
And Sally, could you repeat the amended figure again for me, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Raise $1,939,976.32 and appropriate $2,392,853.
Thank you.
Did you get that?
Is there discussion?
Point of order. Has the motion been seconded?
I seconded it.
Thank you, I didn't notice.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Ron?
Ron Zaldivar. Pardon my confusion. I don't understand. Does this, these amounts include everything we voted and not voted?
The board is clear.
So, okay. I'll wait.
No, it doesn't. This is the specific select board budget that begins on page 23, which is not a culmination of all of these articles that we've been speaking about the past 2 days. So it's in addition to those articles.
So,
Is that your question?
yeah, I'm real confused about numbers now. I'm not good at math. I'm good at adding and subtracting in my checkbook, but this is confusing. We're voting on numbers that, like Mr. Hebert didn't like to vote on the healthcare reform because he didn't know what he was voting on. I don't know what I'm voting on.
The board is clear.
You're voting on the budget to operate the town for the fiscal year of 2012-2013. That budget is included, or it is in your town report starting on page 23.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion on the amendment? Mr. Andrew? Seeing none, Article 31 amended to read to see if the town will raise the amount of $1,939,976.32 and appropriate the sum of $2,392,853 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year. We're voting on the amended numbers. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The amendments passed. To Article 31, to see if the town will raise the amount of $1,939,976.32 and to appropriate the amount of $2,392,853 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year. Is there discussion on the motion? Mr. Andrews.
David Andrews. A moment ago, we voted on Article 30 for the $35,000 for a townwide audit. I'd like to point out that I have a copy of the Guilford town report, which is a nice reference for how other towns are doing it. And every year, the town of Guilford budgets funds for professional audit. The auditors in Guilford check that report and they prepare the town report. So the line item for the auditors is for Guilford is a little bit less than the line item for Vernon. Basically, it's being done by professionals. The amount of money that we're spending this year for auditing services in town consists of really three major categories. The first is the Article 30 money, $35,000, which I fully support. The second is the auditor's salaries, which is $29,000 and change. That's on page 23. But we also need to be aware that the third item is the health insurance costs that we have. Because we have part-time listers, part-time auditors, combined it's full-time. And from the end of 2010, imagine these pretty close figures, the expenditures were another $23,848 for healthcare costs. So we're at about $85,000 this year for auditing the town. There was discussions, and it can't be agreed upon this evening, that going forward that we would ask for an annual audit. And I think that makes perfect sense. We won't be spending $35,000 because I believe that the audit we're doing is $35,000 going back, if not the full 10 years, many years back. That's it's a huge undertaking. I'd like to find out from either the board or from the auditors if we have professional auditors coming in to do this audit for $35,000, and presuming that next year we'll be paying to have PCHAP or whoever gets the contract to do the auditing as well. Are we duplicating our services by having our in-house auditors now, the work that's going to be repeated next year, is the auditor salaries better spent on professional outside auditors?
The board is queried. Mr. Quarterman.
I don't think it would be duplicating services. I have heard the auditors come in and talk to us and tell us that they are not able to audit every single account that is within the town. Is that a correct, fair statement? So there are accounts that they aren't being able to audit, which would be covered under this professional audit. I think the professional audit too would be done, by a certified CPA, which our auditors had admitted yesterday they were not. As to, I think your question is your query to eliminate the auditors in lieu of a professional audit, or to use both?
Mr. Andrews, I believe Mr. Quarterman wants clarification on the
Let's
question.
make sure I was recognized. I'm not suggesting that we remove the position of auditor. We cannot do that. There's statutory language, there's a specific process for it. What I'm suggesting is that we follow a model that's similar to Guilford, where every year a professional auditor comes in and audits all the books, and the auditors that we have are preparing the town report, doing the other miscellaneous functions, which again is a question: if it's something outside of what the professional auditor is doing, why are we paying have somebody do it? I'm questioning whether or not we have duplication of services going on as those funds are better spent elsewhere.
Question to the board, I believe, is, does the town have duplicate services in the realm of auditing? Mr. Quarterman?
So basically what you just indicated was that the auditors could possibly see a decrease in hours because they're performing less of a function because a professional auditor is doing that kind of job. I don't know if that's a kind of decision that we can make tonight.
Are you done, Mr. Quarterman?
Yes.
Is your response, Mr. Ball, in a follow-up and in the same line, or are you going to address a new subject?
That's the same one.
Then I'll let you respond to the previous question. Is having the auditors and the professional auditors, is that having duplicated services?
I hear what Dave is saying, and in a lot of respects I do agree with it in the thought process. But one of the things that we're talking about is how do we improve the level of service or keep the level of service the same as what we've been getting before and basically spending less money. But at the same time, we are talking about the livelihood of a number of people here. We have the ability, through the budget, we can reduce the budget in that line and drop it down so that it basically is only for a certain period of time that they would basically be paid for. And they'd still have the position and the title of auditor. But what you were saying is we're limiting them based on limiting the amount of money that's available. So they're not going to work for free. But at the same time, this is an extremely light turnout tonight. What I would propose is that in order to allow the town to make a decision on how we're moving forward this is something that really I would think that we'd want to have more discussion on, and then also bring it up in Australian ballot next year.
And pointed, there is no motion on the floor. You've just been queried, so there's no action. We're just working on the budget. Right. So at that point, we're not even there yet because
right.
We're just in discussion.
It would have to be right at this point. If somebody were to do that, they would need to make the amendment to cut down the budget. And I'm not suggesting that. All I'm saying is that there's a process that should be probably followed in order to get more people's input on this decision.
Is there further discussion? Mrs. Newton.
Phyllis Newton. I don't think we we should be comparing Vernon to Guilford. Guilford votes to have an annual, or has decided to have an annual outside audit. I'm not objecting to an outside audit. I invite it to come. But we as auditors in Vernon have chosen to audit more than just, first of all, we are not just town auditors, we are town and school auditors. So that wage there is also including paying us to audit the school as well. And the town has 28 funds, and you can see them in your town report. And the treasurer handles over $6,300,000 a year within those funds. So I don't think we can compare Vernon to Guilford. And we also, besides auditing the school, the town doesn't want us to do this, we don't have to, but we audit the delinquent tax collector, we audit the Vernon seniors, anything that has money involves the town, we do, and we reconcile the checkbook every single month for town and school, which a lot of town auditors don't do, but that is an internal control that we feel is very important. An outside audit is just going to have a procedural audit, and they're going to test things, but they're not going to see things from July 1 to June 30th and all the purchase orders and everything else that's involved.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, glasses on, we're back to Article 31 to see if the town will raise the amount of $1,939,976.32 in change and appropriate the sum of $2,392,853 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the ensuing year. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and Article 31 has passed. Article 32, to see if the town will authorize the payment of real and personal property taxes to the town treasurer without discounts in 2 installments, setting the due dates as September 21st, 2012 and February 15th, 2013.
Madam Moderator,
Mr. Cortlandt.
I move that the town authorize the payment of real and personal property taxes to the town treasurer without discounts in 2 installments, setting the due dates as September 21st, 2012 and February 15th, 2013.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Motion has been made and seconded to see if the town will authorize payment of real and personal property taxes to the town treasurer without discounts in 2 installments, setting the due dates as September 21st, 2012 and February 15th, 2013. Is there discussion? Mr. Fairman.
It's a question for the treasurer. When we see, for example, the September 21st, 2012 due date for taxes, are these taxes that are being collected for the fiscal year which begins July 1st, 2012? Okay. So then, therefore, the town borrows money to fund its operations until the taxes come in?
The treasurer's query, Ms. Brassey, bringing a mic to you.
If we needed to do that, we absolutely would do that. We have not needed to do that since we switched from fiscal year July 1 from our calendar year. When we were on a calendar year, we had our town meeting in March and we voted after we started spending our budget, which began in January, and we did not collect taxes until October 1st. So we ended up borrowing from our funds. We're very fortunate in Vernon not to have to borrow money from the bank. But in recent years, since that changed to the fiscal year, we haven't had to borrow money at all.
Thank you, Ms. Brasser. Any further discussion on the article? Not seeing any, we will now vote to see if the town will authorize the payment of real and personal property taxes to the town treasurer without discounts in 2 installments, setting the due dates for those installments as September 21st, 2012 and February 15th, 2013. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Article 32 has passed. And here we are to Article 33, to transact any other business that may lawfully come before this meeting. And I will recognize anyone. Mr. Fairman.
I have 2 points. One under old business.
One at a time, now, please. Well, you're allowed to talk.
I have not even stated the first point yet.
I'm making a clarification of the rules that were stated last night and agreed upon by the body and restated tonight, that you're allowed to ask one question on a subject at a time, then the rest, and you may have one follow-up with that, and then it is open to the rest of, the body here to have their chance, and once everyone who has had a chance to speak, then you may come back to your second topic. Thank you.
Thank you for explaining what I already understood. You cut me off when I said just 2 words. You assumed what I was going to say. What I was going to say is, a year ago, I promised to look into the question of what happened at with the logging at the Vernon Town Forest, where the sales were over $100,000, and we, the taxpayers of Vernon, wound up with $7,200. The report, which is some figures and also 2 photographs by Paul Miller, or what we got for our money in terms of devastation, is on the table over there. In summary, what happened was the logger had a flat rate. So it didn't matter what our sales were. The logger got paid, that it turned out to be 2/3 of the money, and we split the difference with and we split the balance with the forester. However, we also, out of our share, we paid nearly $10,000 to build a road for these people so they could make their money, and that's how we wound up with so little. I do have to say that people tell me that there was cordwood sold out of there also, and I can find no accounting for cordwood. If anyone can help me on this, I will produce a phase 2 of the report where we pin down whether there was any cordwood, and if so, where the money is.
Thank you. Is that?
We're just wondering, are you referring to the lottery woodlots that we had, or are you referring to cordwood that was taken out of there and sold by another company?
May I answer the question?
Yes, you may.
I am referring to, I'm told that, I'm being told by various people that is part of a logging job, that the logger, who was also taking out everything else, also took out cordwood. I'm not referring to the woodlots that are, what would you say, perhaps rented by families in town? I'm not referring to that at all.
The board have any further comment? You need to speak in the microphone. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Fairman, I just did want to say the opening words out of your mouth, just for clarification, where I had 2 points. And that's why I stopped you, because you said you had 2 points. So you may now go to point number 2.
Yes, you could have assumed, but I would have the courtesy to state just one. The issue here is one that has not come up so far in our town meeting, but it is actually an issue that may be of extreme importance. If my understanding is correct, and it probably is because I have verified it with the town treasurer, the grand list for the town of Vernon must be completed by April 1st of this year, April 1st, 2012. It is my understanding that the reappraisal of Vermont Yankee is due, but in fact, there has been nothing done yet to proceed with a reappraisal of Vermont Yankee, which would mean we have 25 days to get it done. Of course, appraising Vermont Yankee is very different from appraising houses. One needs considerable engineering expertise, and one needs knowledge of other nuclear power plants, which our listeners, of course, do not have, because there aren't any other comparable nuclear power plants nearby. Fearing that we're going to wind up in a situation where where energy comes in basically with some people to intimidate us and tries to really lower the value of the plant. I have today taken an initiative simply to obtain information. There are 7 towns in New England and New York that host 11 nuclear power plants, which have 4 owners. So I've begun an initiative to quickly obtain from these towns, and of course one of those towns is Vernon, so 6 other towns, what they can tell us about the appraisals they make on the nuclear power plants they host, the tax agreements that they have, and the expert appraisers that they use, so that we may move quickly to get Yankee properly appraised before we have to produce the grand list April 1st of 2012. And of course, I'd be glad to hear any comments the listeners may have on this subject. They didn't happen to be around when I was checking the details on this, so I asked the treasurer.
And your query right now, would you like it addressed by anyone specific, or are you just directing it to anyone who would like to answer?
I am.
Yeah. Would anyone like to respond? Mr. Ham.
The listers have been, this is not on.
It's on.
The listers have been in contact with the contractor that we have been using in the past. And we've been trying to work out a meeting with the select board. The listers are not authorized to spend money. We cannot meet in contract with him. The select board has wanted to wait to have a meeting after the election, so because they believe there's going to be a change in the board. And that's where we're at now. So we have a contractor waiting in the wings, and it is up to the first actual work meeting with the select board. The listers are on the agenda with them.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Mrs. Newton, you're recognized.
Just for clarification, the grand list for Vermont is set for April 1st, but it's just a date. We do not, we refer back to it, but we do a lot of we don't do any of their listing usually in March because it's muddy. So we wait, and June 4th is our actual date that we have to have our abstract to the state if we have under 2,000 population, 2,000, I believe. But we can ask for an extension, which quite often we have to because of the utilities. We're a very unique town, and we have a lot of utilities, and so we don't have a lot of the values in right on June 4th. The values are set as of April 1st, but I mean, reappraisal year, we worked on it for 2 years, and we didn't have our grievances until August, so it's just a date. But if we don't have a value for VY on April 1st, and we don't have it till June, our grand list is still valid.
Thank you, Mrs. Newton. Anyone else have any topics, discussion? A follow-up?
Another topic.
Well, Mr. Fairman had his card up before you, and I'll be right back to you.
I'll be glad to yield the floor to.
It's different. It is a different subject, it's not a response. Yes,
Okay.
Ron.
Beg your pardon. So therefore, a question directly to the listeners, and perhaps because you were addressing it earlier to Mrs. Newton. Is there a drop dead date by which we must reappraise Vermont Yankee, or we have lost out?
Mrs. Newton, Ms. Query. Mr. Gale, is raising hand with a microphone.
Again, we appraise everything as of April 1, as well as every town in the state. If we don't have our abstract, which is the grand list before grievances. If we don't have it ready, we ask for an extension with the state. We have to give a reason why we need it. If there was a reason that we didn't have the BY appraisal or value set at that time, we would just have to ask for an extension. But it will usually be done by August.
Thank you, Mrs. Newton. Mr. Pine.
I would wonder, the appraisal company that we use to do BY with, do we use the same company all the time? Or when you're looking for somebody to come do an appraisal, is it out for bid, may the best man win?
Right next to you, George.
The listers are queried, Mr. Hammond.
It's not every day that a nuclear plant is appraised. There are not many companies that are capable of doing it. The best companies who want to do it are usually lawyer firms. And when we've met with any of these or talked to any of these, they are usually triple and 4 times what we have this contract with. We have engineers, and we use the town attorney, and then if we need a specialized attorney, which has happened in the past, then that is, a specialized attorney is also brought in to work with the town attorney. But it's unique placement. And there are lots of firms who would love to appraise it, who would only put us in court and put us in a lot of expense. We've had a good relationship with Vermont Yankee. They have usually cooperated with us, and so with this firm has been involved in atomic plants all over the country, and with other plants that Mtg owns. And anyways, the ball really falls in the select board's hands when we get a quote of what it's going to cost and what it costs. But so far, I have met with other firms, and this town has done really well on getting a top-notch appraisal at a very reasonable cost. To us normal people, the reasonable cost is a lot of money. You've got to have somebody who's sharp on his toes, and this guy, I have taken the owner of the company has done employees to Vermont Yankee on other issues, and this guy is so sharp he just blows it right away. And they've been impressed with him to the point where the legislature committee up there invited him back, which was kind of nice because I got to go again. And he brought one of his men with him, where he is just always questioned by the legislature. This guy knows his stuff. And yes, it is up to the select board. They want to find another firm, but to find another firm is going to be like what you just going to be doing with an audit. You're going to have to find a firm who's going to have to start from scratch, but this firm has done the appraisals and has all the records. He actually did it back when Vermont Yankee was Vermont Yankee instead of owned by Mtg, where we got to walk through and any question, any material, any books, they were very accommodating. Vermont Yankee has always been very accommodating to the town.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Any other business to lawfully come before this body? Mrs. Newton.
I was just going to make a suggestion about the article that we had last night, Article 33. There was a lot of time spent in discussion on the outside organizations. There was 24 requests this year, and after paper ballot, 10 of them were defeated. And one of the residents that spoke last night, I believe, I don't remember who she was, the name, but I think she was from SEPCA. She had mentioned...
Ms. Broberg.
Ms. Broberg?
Yes,
okay. Ms. Broberg. She had suggested that in other towns, and it had been done in this town previous years, many years ago, that the organizations that are requesting money have to petition the townspeople a number of signatures to actually go to the select board and have it put on as part of the warning. And I'm suggesting that that maybe be instituted again, because we saw last night this booklet that the town clerk puts together. This year it's 32 pages, and I don't know how many booklets she made, but that's a lot of paper. And out of those 24 organizations, we voted down 10 of them. So I really think that if the organization really wants, and especially Northern Vermont Resource Conservation, I don't think, they just sent a letter and it got in. I don't think they would have come down and petitioned for, I don't know how many signatures is needed, you know, but I would just like to ask that maybe next year it be considered to have a petition.
Can we make that motion?
Any other business to come before this body?
Phyllis, was that a motion?
I don't think you can.
Can that be a motion or no?
Town attorney, Mr. Houghton.
During other...
Richard, could you wait till we bring, I know you're a lawyer, but wait till we bring you back.
During other business, the voters may not adopt any motion that is binding on the select board. So I think that the suggestion that was made, heard by the select board, and the select board has the discretion to discuss it and do as they please, and I'm sure they will.
Thank you very much, Mr. Houghton. Mr. Andrews.
It's not been said yet tonight, but this is Mr. Ball's last time up at the podium. I think Julie's going to be very happy to get her husband back. Maybe we'll give him a round of applause for his effort.
I'm sure Mr. Ball will stay active in the town of Vernon. You have a lot of other stuff to do. Any other business to come before this body? Seeing none, this body is in recess until the Board of Civil Authority arrives with the results of today's elections. Oh, you're going to do it? Okay. The Vernon Town meeting will come back to order out of recess at 10:13. Sue will now give us the election results from the Board of Civil Authority.
Hello, everyone. Are we having a good night? Well, out of 547 votes that were cast, Barack Obama, 135. Newt Gingrich, 28. John Huntsman, 9. Ron Paul, 77. Rick Perry, 2. Mitt Romney, 176. And Rick Santorum, 88. Article 3, shall the Vernon Town School District adopt a budget of $4,094,775 to defray its expenses and liabilities for the 2012-2013 school year? Voting yes, 341, no, 196. Town Moderator, Tim Arsenault, 517. Select Board, 3-year, Michael Kudamach, 183, Sandra Harris, 348. I declare Sandra Harris is the winner. Select Board, 2-year, Jeff Dunkley, 491. Select Board to fill the unexpired term ending in 2014, Howard Fairman, 98, Chris Howe, 245, Stanley Sage, 101, Josh Unruh, 77. I declare Chris Howe the winner. Auditor, Carol Hammond for 3-year, 490. Lister for 3-year, William Hammond, 483. Delinquent Tax Collector, Marilyn Sherlin, 483. First Constable, Peter Crossman, 516. Second Constable, Scott Lane, 491. Town Agent, Trish Hain, 483. Grand Juror, Trish Hain, 484. School Director, 3-year, Mike Hebert, 485. School Director, 2-year, Marianne Gardner, 485. Town School Moderator, Timothy Arsenault, 514. And Union School Director, 3-year, Mike Collier, 487. Thank you so much for voting, and thanks for waiting till we got here. Have a great evening.
With no further business to come before the Vernon Town meeting, I call this meeting recessed at 10:15 p.m. Thank you. Adjourned.